Gracias por presionar ese botoncito. Ya les preparé otro videíto, así que tomen un descansito porque ahí les voy con otro episodio de Spanish Dojito. Ay, qué cursi de veras. Hey guys, here we are again with another episode of Spanish Dojo, where we're working to hone your Spanish speaking skills and make you sound more like a native speaker. Today we're going to be talking about something called diminutives. If you're not familiar with what those are, they're little suffixes you can put at the end of a word in order to decrease the size, the literal size of something, or sometimes they're used just as terms of endearment. So it's not really a literal reference to size, but more figurative. Okay, so this is mainly done in Spanish by using the suffixes ito, ita, illo, illa, etc. Obviously, those would be inflected for gender and number, so you could end up with plural versions and everything. But the ito and illo suffixes are your primary diminutives. As I said, these can be used literally. So you could take something like mesa, which means table, and change that into mesita, meaning a little table. Or something like niño and change that to niñito. So instead of child, it's a little child. Okay, so that would be a literal usage of diminutives. Figurative usage would be something like maybe the word beso, kiss, you could change to besito, which may or may not refer, might mean a little kiss, but it doesn't have to. It could just be making the word more endearing, more affectionate. Okay. Also maybe a word like amor, love, amorcito, would not necessarily, if you use that as a term of endearment for a spouse or significant other, it's not necessarily it's not making the person smaller, right? It's just making the term more affectionate, more endearing. Okay, so you may or may not be familiar with those. My guess is if you've been studying Spanish for any length of time, you've probably come across those. You probably have a general idea of how those work. But what I want to talk about in this video is not so much all the inner workings of diminutives, but rather how they can be used as what I'm going to call buffers. Okay, and this is really just kind of an extension of what I mentioned earlier about these suffixes being used to show endearment or affection. So based on that, you can kind of use them for what I'm going to talk about today. So what do I mean by a buffer? Well, there are some adjectives in Spanish that are just kind of inherently very high-risk adjectives that may otherwise sound harsh or blunt. So some examples would be, and I said adjectives, it could be nouns as well, right? So these could be nouns or adjectives. Some common examples would be words like abuelito, viejito, gordito, ancianito. Okay, so these are all in the diminutive form. The form without the diminutive would be abuelo, viejo, gordo, and anciano. Okay, so why are these diminutive? Well, take a look at what they all have in common. If you know what all of these mean, the first one is grandfather, and likewise, you could use the feminine version and have grandmother as well. The next one is an adjective meaning old. The next one is an adjective meaning fat, and the last one is another adjective meaning old. Okay, or it could be a noun referring to an old person. Okay, so you'll notice that the common denominator here is that these all have to do with people's age and size, and that's not an accident, right? And I think across cultures, when we talk about people's age and size, this is a common area that's very high risk where you could possibly insult someone or offend someone or whatever. And so there's a reason that these types of buffers happen with these types of nouns and adjectives. And so what often happens is you hear these nouns and these adjectives almost always in their diminutive form. So honestly, I don't know that I've ever heard native Mexican Spanish speakers, at least. I don't know about other countries, but speakers of Mexican Spanish, I don't know that I've ever heard native speakers use words like abuelo and gordo without the diminutives, unless their express intent is to insult or offend someone. Then obviously you would hear them that way because that's why they're being used. But in normal everyday life, if you want to talk about someone being a little bit older, or if you want to address your grandfather, or you know, just anything like that, you're almost always going to hear these in the diminutive. So one thing to keep in mind is that if you mess this up and maybe you're talking and you use one of these without the diminutive, don't worry too much about it. I think as a non-native speaker, you're going to be extended quite a bit of grace. They'll give you the benefit of the doubt that there was really no intent to offend. But it is something that you do want to be aware of, and you should kind of tailor your speech to take this into account. For one, because this is the way native speakers are naturally going to use them as well. And so I mean, that's really your goal, isn't it? Is to try to speak more like a native speaker. So if this is the form that people are used to hearing them in, that's probably the way you want to structure your speech as well. Okay. And, you know, besides that, it's important to understand how you'll probably hear these things from native speakers. Since you probably won't hear them said in their plain forms, then you need to be aware of what those diminutive buffer forms are for when they come up in conversation. So, not too long a video today. I hope that helps. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. As always, like and subscribe. And if you're watching this video after 2019, be sure to check the description for a link to my book. And that's it for this episode. I'll see you next time. Thanks.